Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Monkey Business. Meet India's amazing primates. Presented by Nat Hab Expedition Leader Aditya Panda. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Over to you, Aditya.
Thank you, Rob. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Daily Dose of Nature webinar from India. My name is Aditya Panda, and I lead Nat Hab's India expeditions. I've been leading Nat Hab trips in India since 2016. Now, primates. They range in size from the great apes to the little lorises. And all of them have certain common defining features. Now, these features might be shared with other mammals as well, but a combination of them is found in the order Primates. Now, these features include forward-facing eyes, a shortened muzzle, opposable thumbs or a big toe or both, the ability, or at least some ability, to stand upright, and the presence of nails instead of claws or digits. Sounds very familiar, doesn't it? Now, in India, we have 22 species of primates, excluding Homo sapiens, of course, that is us human beings. And the largest primate in India is the Himalayan langur, while the smallest is the Malabar grey slender loris. The commonest primate, as we will see later in the webinar, is the Rhesus macaque, and the rarest, or rather most endangered, is the western Hoolock Gibbon. We can divide primates that are found in India to 4 different groups. Lorises, which are small and round-eyed, like you can see here. Then there are macaques, which are stocky and have a short to medium length tail, like this lion-tailed macaque here. And then, of course, we have langurs, which have longer tails, like this Himalayan grey langur here, which we just discussed is the largest primate found in India. And we have gibbons, which are the only non-human ape found in India, and they do not have a tail. Now, I'd love to talk about all 22 species of primate in India, but that would require many more hours than is possible on a Daily Dose of Nature webinar. So I'm going to stick to the primates that we are most likely to see on a Nat Hab expedition in India. And we'll start with the Rhesus macaque, which is the commonest and most widespread monkey in the subcontinent, and one that you are likely to see, one that is likely to be your first wildlife experience as soon as you land in Delhi and drive from the airport to your hotel. Rhesus macaques are highly commensal with humans. You find them, we do find them out in the wilderness, we find them in the forests, but they're found in much lesser numbers than they would be in many human inhabited areas. They are highly adaptive, and they do very, very well in areas that are already occupied by humans. In India, you find them right in the middle of large cities. You find them localizing around temples, Hindu temples, where people make a lot of offerings in the form of fruit and flowers to the temple deities, which serves the monkeys really well. And you do find them in the wilderness, but in much lesser densities and numbers than you find them in human inhabited areas. Now, one of the most striking features of the Rhesus macaque is its pink or reddish face, and its equally pink or reddish bottom. And these features grow, they glow bright and very, very red especially when the monkeys, when the females are in estrus, and when it is breeding season, even the males exhibit this sort of blushing, if you could call that. As these are very widespread, commonly found creatures, they are listed as a species of least concern and found abundantly. Rhesus macaques live, they can be found even as individuals. I've seen many lone males, especially in urban areas, which is possible because there a lot of people do keep them as pets, which is illegal. Once these monkeys grow up, once they grow older, they become difficult to handle and they become very aggressive. So people just let them out, and you might see the odd, usually fat male rhesus macaque doing its rounds around cities. But the typical rhesus macaque troop can range in size from 2 individuals to as many as 250. And the interesting thing about these troops is that depending upon circumstances, availability of food, etc., they can break up into smaller groups, or you can also have a number of troops getting together to form one super troop. These monkeys are not very large. They weigh about 10 to 20 pounds. Now, I told you about how they're found very commonly in urban areas, in human-occupied areas. And, while there is a lot of tolerance among Indian people towards all kinds of animals living among them, the monkey enjoys a special level of tolerance thanks to its, the Hindu god Hanuman, who is the monkey god. And, that allows for a lot of reverence and tolerance for monkeys in human inhabited areas. But that doesn't stop these monkeys from being a real nuisance to people wherever they are. They enter houses, they destroy things, they steal food, they have learned how to open and close refrigerators, and occasionally they do bite people and are considered a carrier of rabies. So there is an increasing amount of conflict between humans and monkeys, and this sort of conflict gets it increases a lot because of the unfortunate habit of some people of feeding these monkeys, and that makes them bolder, that makes them it sustains much larger populations of monkeys than there would normally be without people artificially feeding them, and it also encourages them to steal food from people. So this can often become a big problem. And in India's, in Delhi's parliament area, the area where the government of India functions from, this has started to become a big problem because these monkeys were all around the parliament building and in the diplomatic enclave and in even the president's palace. And to deal with this, a very innovative solution was found. The larger langurs, the Hanuman langur, or what are now called the Northern Plains langur, are used to scare away rhesus macaques from around these areas in Delhi. Among the wide array of animals that find official engagement and employment with the government of India, for example, we have perhaps the world's only cavalry. And of course, there are elephants that work with the forest department across India. And we also have monkeys under the employment of the government of India officially. And these monkeys are trained, these langur monkeys are trained to scare away the rhesus macaques. And they take their business quite seriously. And, in the event of say, a major international event like the Commonwealth Games in 2010, the langurs were used to make sure that the venues were free of Rhesus macaques. Now, another very well-known fact about the Rhesus macaque, of course, is that the RH factor that we use to group our blood, to divide, to identify our blood types in different blood groups, was first discovered in Rhesus macaques that were used in labs. And that's the reason why the factor that is used to identify our different blood types is known as the RH factor or the Rhesus factor. Now, let's come to the Northern Plains langur, which is my personal favorite monkey when out on safari, especially in central India and northwestern India. Now, the Rhesus macaque, as I said, is very widespread, and so is the Northern Plains langur. And on Nat Hab expeditions, some of the best places to see both monkeys are, of course, the Ranthambore National Park, where we go on the India Tiger Quest and India Tiger Safari photography photo pro expeditions, and the Grand India Wildlife Adventure, where we visit the Bandhavgarh and Kanha National Parks, where it is it's an ideal place to find both these species, especially the Northern Plains langur. The Northern Plains langur is one of what are now considered 8 different subspecies. Earlier, they were all classed into one species called the grey langur, but across different parts of India, across different geographies, there were many phenotypical features that were found to be different from region to region among the local langur populations. And further research has indicated that we have 8 different subspecies of grey langur in India. The ones we see on safari, of course, are the Northern Plains langur. The Northern Plains langur, again, is a species that is of least concern in terms of conservation, fears. Their populations are doing very well and they're very widespread. But these langurs have a different social structure than the macaques. You can have some very large troops of langur, as many as over 100. But typically, langur troops are dominated by 1 or 2 males who are the alpha males in that troop, and the rest of the troop is full of females and youngsters. There are also bachelor troops, and very rarely one gets to witness the awe-inspiring but very bloody takeover of a troop that sometimes happens when a bachelor group takes on an established troop. And these can be very intense, violent takeovers. And the bachelor groups, which usually consist of adult but young adult males, led by 1 or 2 dominant alpha males, these troops can plan and take over an established troop, and when they do that, they attack and fight with all the males. The younger males and the babies are often killed, and if the troop succeeds in driving off the alpha males of the established troop, they will then take over the troop and the females of the troop as well. Langurs are much larger than the macaques and weigh about twice as much, say in the range of about 20 pounds or so, plus or minus, depending on the size of the animal, and the males are significantly larger than the females. Now, one of the reasons why we love langurs is that they really are our friends in safari. Langurs, like the Rhesus macaque, can show some amount of commensalism, but not to the scale at which the Rhesus macaque shows. And if you meet a langur, if you had to meet either of these two species in person, you would be far more comfortable, being in physical proximity of langurs than you would in the company of macaques, because langurs are usually much better behaved and more dignified, and they keep to themselves. But that's not the only reason why we consider them our friends in safari. Langurs are extremely watchful. They always have one member of the unit, at least one member of the unit, out on sentry duty. Out in the forest, all kinds of threats exist to these monkeys, and tigers and leopards love to prey on them, especially leopards. And that's the reason why langurs always have at least one individual of the troop on full-time sentry duty. And they keep an eye out on the forest from the tops of trees. And when they're on the ground, they're usually very skittish if there is any kind of big cat movement happening in the area. And the moment they notice any big cat movement, they start giving out loud alarm calls, which then immediately alert us, safari people, to the presence of a big cat. And if these alarm calls are continuous and strong, then we have reason to believe that this is a very strong alarm call, and one that needs to be taken seriously. And a continuous alarm call usually means the big cat is on the move. And in the thick forest of the Indian jungle, it is often not possible to see the big cat unless it appears out on a road or in a meadow or along a stream bed or some other such area. And that makes it extremely difficult to figure out where it is moving, which direction it's going in, how fast it's going, and where it might appear. So we try and find the langurs on the canopy, and if we succeed in finding the animal that is giving out the alarm calls, then it's quite easy to follow that animal and its gaze and be able to figure out where the big cat is moving. Now, this particular langur here had come down for a drink of water, but even before she could go down and have a sip, she got up on her legs and looked very alertly to her left, and then scampered off a tree. And look what happened the next minute. So here is a troop of langurs, and that's what the alarm call sounds like. Do turn up your volume. It's a very distinct, a very loud coughing kind of sound that is instantly distinguishable from the typical territorial calls of the large male langurs, which is a very loud, booming sort of call, and also very different from the usual calls that the younger monkeys make while they're playing around. So that's what a langur alarm call sounds like. But sometimes, as in this case, on a nice winter morning with a beautifully warming sun coming out, the sentry might fall asleep. Langurs primarily stay up in the canopy. They do come down a lot, but they primarily feed up in the canopy. And their diet consists of a large amount of leaves and also fruit. But again, as I said, langurs sometimes show commensalism with people in certain areas. And when they do that, like us, they pick up bad food habits. They start eating junk food. They start eating whatever they're handed out by people: bread, biscuits, chips, and whatnot. So on that note, I should remind everybody that try and avoid feeding wild animals anywhere in the world. That's not good for them, and it's not good for us either. Now here is a picture that I took in the Kanha Tiger Reserve, where it was very interesting to observe these two langurs braving the cold weather and getting into the water to feed on some aquatic plants. They don't do that very often, but sometimes they do. The Rhesus macaque, if you noticed in the first slide, let me go back there, does feed a lot on aquatic plants. Yeah, this was taken in Bandhavgarh Tiger Reserve. Now, I was discussing about langur's social structures. Look at this picture. There's a lot happening in this picture. There are, some adult females with babies clutching the babies. There are some females without babies. There are babies of varying ages and sub-adults. And the babies, of course, are monkeying around, jumping about, while this female here is doing a great job of grooming this other female who is higher in social status in the troop. And monkeys can groom obsessively. It not only helps them get rid of things like insects and ticks and dirt, but it also is a way of bonding, strengthening social ties, strengthening bonds. It is also used as a form of currency to win favors. So if one monkey, usually lower in the social ladder, wants to be in the good books of a monkey who is higher in the social ladder, or wants to eat something that the other monkey is eating, then it will go groom it to try and win favor. Now this is that same troop, and suddenly these monkeys here have become alert to something, but of course later they decided that it wasn't a threat, and then they went back to monkeying around. The youngsters, they squabble and play fight a tremendous lot. And as I was mentioning, there are the alpha males, and there's usually one, but in larger troops there can be two. And these two here are two alpha males of a troop. You can almost see the serious, wizened looks on their faces compared to, say, these guys here. Langurs are phenomenal photographic subjects. They're so photogenic, and they're ever so willing to be photographed. One of my most favorite things to do while out on safari, especially when big game action might be on the lower side, is to find a troop of langurs and just park next to them and photograph them and watch them getting into all kinds of fun antics. Now, this was one morning when the sun was just beginning to come up on a nice, crisp winter day in Kanha Tiger Reserve. And these langurs decided to find a patch of the road where the sunlight filtered through the canopy, and they decided to sun themselves. And it was a fantastic opportunity to take some lovely pictures of them backlit against that sunlight, with a mist in the background and a few shafts of light filtering through the sal forest canopy. And of course the leaf litter here, because this was closer to spring, which is the fall season here in India, the leaf litter here really added to that ambience. And this langur here allowed me to get quite close on the Ranthambore fort, that is high above the Ranthambore Tiger Reserve. And look at the size of those canines. When this isn't a threat display, he was just yawning. And this one here is grooming this female. As we travel from central India to northeastern India, it's a different world. On the Grand India Wildlife Adventure, we travel to this fabulous tiger reserve and national park called Kaziranga. It is in the Indian state of Assam, in the far northeastern, frontier regions of the country. And that area is so different from what you see in the subcontinent, the so-called mainland. That's a region where the Indian subcontinent is merging into or transforming into Southeast Asia. And for that reason, that area has a super high diversity of all forms of life. For a lot of peninsular Indian or subcontinental Indian species, that is the easternmost range of their distribution, while for a lot of Southeast Asian species, that is the westernmost range or the beginning of the distribution as you travel from India. So many species in this area, in this part of India, remind us how close that area is to Southeast Asia. And one of them is the Western Hoolock gibbon. The Hoolock gibbon is the only ape, the only non-human ape found in India. And there are two species of Hoolock gibbon that we have here, subspecies rather. One is the Western Hoolock gibbon, and the other is the Eastern Hoolock gibbon. Now, when we travel to Kaziranga and Assam, the species that we get to see there is the Western Hoolock gibbon. The Western Hoolock gibbon is also India's most endangered primate. In the 1980s, there were believed to be about 100,000 of them, but their numbers right now are, less than 5,000. The primary reason behind that is the fragmentation of gibbon habitat, and I'll tell you why that is such a problem for gibbons, while it is not for so many other monkeys, and how so many other monkeys have managed to adapt to human habitation, to the growth of urbanization, and are still doing fine, but why gibbons in particular have suffered so much. Now, the gibbon, the Hoolock gibbon, Western Hoolock gibbon, is classified as endangered by the IUCN, and as we'll find out later, these gibbons are very vocal, and they are about the size of a small human child, and they weigh about 12 to 15 pounds. And here I'm going to play you the song of the Hoolock gibbon. The most magical sound. You often hear them much before you see them in the forest, and they're not always easy to see because they're high up in thick canopy. But to hear the song of the Hoolock gibbon in the forest, especially early in the morning, is the most magical thing. Their songs are supposed to be they have very complex notes, and they have since the Hoolock gibbon lives in pairs, in monogamous pairs, unlike most other monkeys and most other primates. They have very perfected duets that the gibbon pair sings, and they always start with a bit of practice before they break into full song. And in Assam, where we travel to the Kaziranga National Park, the local people always refer to gibbons as married couples, because it is true that they mate for life, and unlike other monkeys, they do not live in large groups. They live they live as a married couple. They live in pairs, and the pair might, of course, have children, and the babies live with their parents till closely bonded, and live with their parents till they reach adulthood, and then they go their own ways. This gibbon here is a male. This Western Hoolock gibbon is a male. It's dark black, and you can see the prominent eyebrows, the white eyebrows, which you also see in the female, which is why it was once also called the white-browed gibbon. The female, as you might notice here, is blonde. Now, the babies are born blonde, but then they become darker as they age, and until they become, completely black. And then upon reaching adulthood, the males continue to remain black while the females turn blonde like their mothers. Now, gibbons have an amazing form of locomotion. You see, I was telling you about how gibbon numbers fell in India to just below 5,000 now, down from 100,000 in the 1980s. These gibbons are almost entirely arboreal. They live high up in the canopy. They will never leave a tree unless they really have to, and they only leave a tree if they happen to fall down, or if there is something extremely compelling to make them do that. And they're so arboreal and so territorial, in fact, that they will not leave their part of the canopy and go to another part of the canopy in case there is some sort of fragmentation, some sort of break, say a road, for example, or a paddy field, or a tea estate, or something else that comes up that clears the canopy up. So, these gibbons will permanently become isolated and imprisoned in one patch of forest if it is isolated from, the nearby patches, even by a few hundred feet. Speaking of them being territorial, and those calls were territorial, these gibbons are so territorial that they will not even move to a neighboring territory, even if food resources in their territory are becoming very scarce. And that is one more reason that makes them more prone to extinction, more prone to being endangered. Now, while we're on the subject of them being arboreal, you might notice in these pictures that the arms of gibbons are much longer than their legs. In fact, their arms are over 1.5 times as long as their legs, and they move around mostly, by hanging from branches and swinging really fast. They can swing as fast as 40 kilometers an hour. and sometimes they can also walk along branches, but they primarily move by swinging. And in the rare instance that a gibbon is forced to walk on the ground, it can be a really miserable, clumsy animal that's having a lot of issues moving around. They're said to walk with their arms held up in what is known as the surrendered terrorist or the surrendered pirate pose. And they really have, they're not in their element at all, walking on the ground. You might be wondering, how do they drink water if they do not come down to the ground? Well, gibbons can subsist quite well on the dew that's deposited on leaves overnight in the areas where they're found. It is, it's one of the finest wilderness experiences while out on safari in India, to be able to watch gibbons swinging from branch to branch and singing their song. And gibbons are primarily frugivores. They do also eat leaves. Unlike the other monkeys, the other primates, they're not all that adaptable when it comes to a choice of diet. So they're yet another reason for them to be more prone to being endangered and being, closer to extinction. They're quite specialists in their habitat and food needs that way. Now, here's another monkey that we are likely to come across while traveling in northeastern India. It's called the cat langur. And these monkeys, again, like the gibbons, are extremely arboreal. Unlike other langurs, unlike, say, the northern plains langur that we spoke about earlier, they do not spend any time on the ground at all. Their social units are smaller than most langurs and macaques, and usually number between 5 to 15 or 16. And just like with the northern plains langur, you can have troops that have one male, one dominant male, and multiple females, or you might also have some bachelor troops. Here's some beautiful capped langurs from Kaziranga. These monkeys, again, they're so shy. They're not like the other monkeys. They're not like the other langurs. The gibbons and capped langurs are much shyer than the other monkeys that you usually find in India. And that is why sighting them is always such a treat. And they make for amazing photography subjects as well. Now, with that, I'd like to end today's webinar, and we shall move on to the Q&A soon. And before we get there, I'd like you to have a look at all the expeditions we have available here in India. And of them, the one that's going to show you the most number of primates is the Grand India Wildlife Adventure. Do look these trips up on our website, www.nathab.com, or get in touch with this phone number or this email ID to inquire about them. Rob, could we have the Q&A session, please?
Thank you, Aditya. Before we start the question and answer session, I'd like to remind everyone that you could submit your questions via the question field in your control panel. And with that, let's ask a few questions, shall we? All right, so let's talk about monkeys, primates, and apes. Can you explain what the difference is, just to clarify for us?
Well, primates is, it's the order. All monkeys, all apes, langurs, macaques, lorises, great apes, lesser apes like gibbons, us humans, all of us are primates. Monkeys have tails. Apes do not have tails. Humans, gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans, gibbons, we are all apes. We do not have tails. We do not have a protruding tail. And the apes can also, we spend most of our time walking upright or in some stage of an upright posture. So that's the primary difference.
Great, thank you for clarifying that for us. So amazing sounds. Lots of people were really excited to hear the sounds. Of course, some of them even sounded like birds at some point, which is really interesting.
Well, if I can go back to the Langur alarm calls, there was actually bird call also in the background. So I think people might have confused that with the alarm calls. Where is that? Yeah. Yeah, those are bird calls in the background. So the alarm call is the coughing sound that you hear. Listen carefully. That's the alarm call. I hope that made that clear.
Great, thanks for making that clarification on that. Good to know. So what happens if one of the gibbons passes away? What will the surviving partner continue on alone? Will they try to find a different partner? What happens?
Well, they will mourn and they will remain alone for a while, but they do likely find other partners. But again, it might not always be possible to find partners because it's not a troop kind of situation where you have multiple members living together, and I'm sure there's a pretty high shortage of partners in an entirely monogamous society of the kind that gibbons have. But yes, eventually they do try and find a partner and continue that drive for reproducing and taking their species forward.
Interesting. So the gibbons are very territorial. How do the offspring of the gibbons develop their own territories, and is there a danger of inbreeding?
Well, in isolated populations, in areas where say a patch of forest is entirely isolated, and there is absolutely no canopy connectivity, for a large area, there is always the danger of inbreeding because the population that is in that patch of forest gets trapped within it. And when the young gibbons, after reaching adulthood, when they go their separate ways and they look for a girlfriend or a wife, they'll have trouble finding someone they're not related to in an isolated area of that sort. But yes, in normal circumstances, that's how a young gibbon would go and find a mate of a similar age, and then pair, and then they live together. And gibbons can actually build nests with leaves high up in the canopy to sleep in. That's something I forgot to mention.
They are fascinating creatures. Now let me ask you this. Since their population is so low, have there been any captured for release into other habitats that are suitable for them?
Well, I'm not aware of any exercise where gibbons have artificially been translocated. And the species that is so territorial and so attached, not just to each other as a pair, but so attached to its own territory that, to the extent that if food is scarce in their own territory, they'll not even venture into the neighboring area. I don't think capture and translocation could work very well. Even if there have been such exercises that have been conducted, I'm not aware of them. The best way to prevent inbreeding and this race towards extinction is to ensure that canopy connectivity is kept intact, and that in areas where it has been destroyed, that it is restored. And in areas where it is impossible to do that, such as say across highways, then it is possible to help gibbons cross from one patch of forest to another by providing aids such as ropes and other artificial connectivity between the canopies of forest on either side of whatever intrusion there is in between them, and then those gibbons can actually cross from one patch of forest to another.
Very interesting. So they do provide artificial means for the gibbons to get from one side of the road to the other. That's fantastic. So let's talk about
places.
Well, we need more of that, I'm supposing. So now the langurs appear to be smaller than the Rhesus macaques, but they're afraid of the langurs. Do you know why that is?
No, the langurs are actually larger. They weigh about twice as much as a Rhesus macaque. I don't know how it came across in the pictures, but the langurs are much larger than the Rhesus macaques. But let me remind you of, let me tell you of one interesting observation I had once made at Ranthambore National Park. Now, the langur may be larger, but the lone male Rhesus macaque is far more aggressive and far more willing to take on, violent fights compared to the typical langur. So there was this one male Rhesus macaque, probably an outcast from its own troop, that had sort of joined a troop of grey langurs that I had seen in Ranthambore, and this male macaque would display its dominance by actually mounting the female langurs. So yes, there are situations where the Rhesus macaque as an individual could try and intimidate a langur, but in general the langur monkey is much larger than a macaque, and these trained langurs that are used around the Parliament area in Delhi do a very effective job of scaring the Rhesus macaques away.
Great. Is there a lot of interaction between the different species, or do they tend to stay to themselves?
They can be found feeding in the same area sometimes, but there isn't much interaction. Where there is interaction, though, is between langurs and spotted deer, a lot, in fact. You see, deer have an excellent sense of smell and hearing, which the langurs do not have. But the langurs have the advantage of great eyesight and of a vantage point of view from the tops of trees. So together they work very well to warn each other of the presence of a carnivore, a tiger or a leopard. Also, deer cannot reach up to the canopy. So often you'll see langur feeding on fruit and dropping them to the ground to deer that are waiting below for for these doles, and they feed off them. And the same is true for a lot of leaves as well, which the deer can never reach.
Wow, that's amazing. So they help to protect each other. That is unbelievable. It really is. So let's going back to the gibbons. Are the local population, are they in support of the protections for this endangered species?
Yes. See, gibbons as such do not have any direct conflict with people. They never leave the canopy. They're very shy. They keep away from human inhabited areas. And unlike other monkeys like macaques or sometimes even langurs, they do not come and destroy property or raid fields or raid kitchens. So there is no reason for antagonism as such between local communities and gibbons, but it is to do more with land use practices like, farming and cutting down forests to build create large tea estates, or human infrastructure like highways and railways and power lines that sort of slash through forests and fragment them.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That is the last question that we have today. So I'd like to hand it back to you for any closing comments.
Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I look forward to seeing you soon on another Daily Dose of Nature webinar.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to thank everyone who tuned in today. Join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out next week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar for today. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next week.